Passione is a gang in the world of JoJo that has a large quantity of stand users among its squad, and this is due both in part to the fact that the only entry test that we know that involves with joining Passione is one that involves coming in contact with the stand arrow, but also just the general dangerous environment is a place where stand users thrive. Though among this group exists a few named characters we encounter that we don't actually see have a stand. People like Pericola or Gelato and Sorbet from La Squadra, and even the first Passione gangster we actually get to see, this being Leaky-Eye Luca. And what I thought would be fun to discuss is both whether or not Leaky-Eye Luca had a stand and what type of stand he would have had if he did. Now, Leaky-Eye Luca as a character acts as sort of an inciting incident for the entirety of the part and helps get the ball rolling, as his interaction with Giorno is what led Giorno to meeting and ultimately befriending Bruno, and Bruno is what led Giorno to being part of Passione, and so on until Giorno ends up becoming the boss of the gang. Though as a character, Luca only appears in a handful of panels from a single chapter in Part 5, and only a single episode in the Golden Wind anime, and in all of this appearance, we don't know if he has a stand. This includes the extra scenes added by David Productions. Nothing is ever made concrete about that. Though we do get a brief look into his own personality and personal backstory with the gang and why he got his name. And Araki gave him enough of a standout design that it would be easy for him to be one of the stand users in Passione. So before we get too into that, let's discuss the meaning behind his name and what musical reference inspired Luca before we start discussing what type of stand he possibly had or could have had. So Leaky-Eye Luca gets its name from a Suzanne Vega song called Luca, which was released in 1987. The song itself covered child abuse, with the protagonist Luca being a person who is deflecting accusations of abuse in a very common way that young abuse victims do. And this is based off an incident that Suzanne witnessed outside her apartment with a group of kids playing around, though one of the kids looked a bit different than the rest, and his name was Luca. Though she didn't know if Luca in real life was an abuse victim, the character of Luca in the song itself is absolutely a victim of child abuse. And this song remains as one of her highest grossing works in her entire discography, reaching number 1 in Poland and Sweden, number 2 in Canada and New Zealand, and even reaching number 3 in the Billboard Hot 100 in the US. And the song itself had a very unique appeal, which helped those who were actually suffering from abuse feel like they weren't alone in the world, and it even touched artists that were performing around the same time as her, such as Prince, who wrote Suzanne a letter thanking her for making the song. Though this wasn't something made public until after Prince's passing, so its connection to JoJo and Luca are very impossible. Though it is a very interesting coincidence given that Giorno was inspired by Prince in a certain way, and Luca is inspired by Suzanne, the fact that they knew each other and interacted like that. It's just neat. Now, the narrative of the song works quite well for both of the times that Luca appears in Part 5, or at least is mentioned in Part 5, as they are both about getting information out of someone, and Luca, in the song, Luca is constantly deflecting answers. And we see this in Giorno just deflecting Luca's advancements and him trying to extort money out of him, but also when Bruno begins to interrogate Giorno, he balls up and gets protective. And this makes sense that Giorno is the one involved in this because Giorno himself is a victim of child abuse, so it works well with the narrative of the song. Along with this, Luca's visual quirk of him constantly having a watery eye, which comes from the fact that he got into a fight where he refused to back down and ended up getting stabbed in the eye, leaving it damaged to the point that it's constantly tearing up, is seemingly in reference to the fact that Suzanne based this song off of a kid named Luca who she didn't even know if was actually being abused. So while the song is an emotional song and very impactful, it comes from a sort of artificial emotion. So Luca's eye constantly tearing up is sort of him crying, but it's a fake cry because he's not himself actually sad, just as Suzanne did not know if Luca was actually being abused. And speaking of his design, another big quirk about Luca is his shovel, which is a standard metal shovel with a sharpened edge and an SPQR engraved on it, which is an abbreviation for the Roman Senate and the People, which is emblematic of the Roman government and is seemingly used to place Luca as an authority in every scene that he appears in, as he is the arm of the authority that is Passione. And finally, the outfit that Luca is wearing is seemingly covered in an onion design, which could play into the leaky-eyed portion of his name, given that onions are known for causing people to cry, though I am not 100% certain on this portion because I am not a botanist and I couldn't really identify the flower too well myself. I'm just going off of what I understand it to be. And with that all said and done, that's basically everything we know about Leaky-Eyed Luca in the series, as beyond this point, he's pretty unceremoniously killed off and forgotten about, as Giorno is soon accepted by Bruno into the gang. Though, what if he was a stand user? I mean, it's not hard to believe that he could have been one given the organization that he was a part of, and one moment in the story that I feel like helps build this idea that he at least knew what stands or stand abilities were was when Luca reacted violently towards Giorno when he just had a small frog hop on him. Because if Luca knows what stands or stand abilities are, that means he likely knows how crazy shit can be when something out of the ordinary happens, no matter how simple or mundane it might be. Thus, he is instantly suspicious of anything weird, which he actually is completely right for being suspicious about the frog, because it turns out that that frog actually is the effect of a stand, so he's not only right, but he's doubly right if he was worried about a stand ability. And with that all understood, I feel like the best thing to make Luca stand would of course be his trusty shovel, and I've named this stand Vega, after Suzanne Vega, the musician who wrote the song that Luca got his name from. Along with this, it's also a reference to Vega, the brightest star in the Lyra constellation, which is said to be in reference to the musical instrument of many works of fiction, being Orpheus's lyre or King Arthur's harp. It's supposed to represent a tool that helps someone in a rough spot. Vega is a materialized or bound stand that has materialized or bound itself to a pointed edge spade, and in this form it is visible to even a normal person, as seen in the David Productions original scene. Vega, when it is in use, can do anything a normal shovel can do, but the main ability that may aid in its usage is something called density manipulation. Density manipulation is an ability that allows Luca to change the density of anything that touches Vega, and this can even include the shovel itself, meaning Luca can swing his shovel and basically change how heavy or light it is mid-swing. Along with this, he can change how dense or malleable the thing that he's hitting is. For example, when Luca's attack is redirected, his skull is caved in like it was made of silly putty, and there's no blood to be seen. So I imagine that in this scenario where he has this stand, he hit Giorno with full force, but made the body malleable so that he could really leave a print. Along with this injury apparently didn't kill him right away, or it did. I'm not actually sure. There's two conflicting stories on this. But if it didn't, the malleableness of his head possibly saved him from a truly fatal injury right away. Now, the reason I picked an ability like this is because it worked well with who the user would be, as I wanted to make Luca a low-level threat, but still someone who you could fear and could be portrayed as an authority in a way. Along with this, the stand allowed him to exist among stand users without being at a disadvantage, and it's one that doesn't make Luca look dumb for not using it correctly in his fight against Giorno. He just happened to pick a fight with a guy who could naturally counter his ability, and because he didn't know that Giorno had a stand, a lot of JoJo fights always end poorly for the person who is less informed. I also, of course, didn't want to give him an overly complicated stand. I wanted something that fit well with Luca's overall design, and converting his shovel into a stand really helped with his character. And I also felt like it'd be cool that if the reason that his eye actually started bleeding is because the fight that he got into that he didn't back down from was the fight against Black Sabbath, and the stand arrow pierced him in the eye, causing it to cry permanently. And that's not too strange for the stand arrows, as they sometimes cause weird bodily defects. So it made sense to me, though most of that idea doesn't match up with any information that we've learned about Luca, so it's more so a cool idea that I thought I'd mention than anything that I'd ever actually want to be canon or would even fight to be canon. And with that all being said, of course, I want to re-emphasize that this video is fan speculation on what Luca's stand might have been. In the canon of the series, it appears that he was just a grunt designed to introduce Giorno to Bruno, and to advance the story. And even though he had some depth to him with the song influence and how it played into Giorno as a character, he wasn't important to the overall plot, but his actions that day did lead to a complete reconstruction of Passione within a little over a week. So you could say that Leaky-Eyed Luca was the first domino in Giorno's rise to power. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. And if you want to dig your own grave and rest easy, well, you can do so at buyshimonetta.com. Buy yourself a copy of Shimonetta, Boring World Where the Constant Dirty Jokes Doesn't Exist. Have a lovely day.